Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony, which today commemorates the 105th anniversary of the Australian Naval and Military Expeditionary Force landing on New Britain. My name is Richard Cruz, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Air Force is Squadron Leader Guri Singh. At the outbreak of the First World War, the German East Asia Squadron was seen as posing a potential threat to Allied merchant shipping in the region. New Guinea was part of the Imperial German Pacific Protectorates, which included the German Solomon Islands, the Caroline Islands, Palua, some of the Mariana Islands, the Marshall Islands, and Nauru. Britain requested that Australia seize German wireless stations in German New Guinea and establish a military administration occupying the territory under the British flag. This evening, we're honoured to welcome Captain Sean Andrews on behalf of the Royal Australian Navy, Mr John Harrison, representing the Naval Association of Australia, ACT section, and Mr John King, President of the Returned and Services League of Australia, ACT branch. On the 11th of September, a small party attempted to capture an inland wireless station at Bitapaka. In the skirmishes that followed, 6 Australians were killed or died as a result of their wounds. They would be the first Australian forces to die in the First World War. By the 17th of September, terms had been reached and all military resistance ended, with German New Guinea under Australian control. The German threat in the region had ceased. The Australian military occupation began. We're honoured also this evening to acknowledge Air Vice Marshal Ravi Gopal Krishna Kapoor, Assistant Chief of the Air Force, Indian Air Force, Air Commodore Philip Champion, Director Strategy and Planning, Australian Air Force, and the accompanying delegations. As always, we welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. And during this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors and students on behalf of the following schools. From New South Wales, MacKillop College, Port Macquarie, St Catherine's Catholic College, Singleton, and Beechwood Public College from Beechwood. Australia's Federation Guard is a tri-service ceremonial unit of the Australian Defence Force. They provide a ceremonial presence at civil and military events and during visits to Australia by foreign dignitaries. The Guard will now dismount the catapult party from the tomb of the unknown Australian soldier within the Hall of Memory. If you're able, I invite you all to please stand and join in singing the national anthem. Students, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway lands. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths and floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to able seaman John Edward Walker. John Walker was born on the 17th of December, 1884 in Townsville, Queensland, the son of John and Mary Walker. He grew up in Townsville and attended school locally. As a young man, he moved to Sydney seeking greater opportunities and went to live with Mrs. Courtney, a friend of his mother. Mrs. Courtney, who had 6 sons of her own, suggested John go by the surname Courtney to fit in as a family member. Shortly after the turn of the century, Walker signed on for service on a ship using the name John Courtney. Throughout the early 1900s, he served at sea as John Courtney and became a member of the Royal Australian Naval Reserve. Walker married, lived in North Sydney with his parents and wife, and was working on a station near Walgett, near country New South Wales. Soon after the outbreak of First World War, the British government asked the Australian government to send a force to occupy German New Guinea. The Australian Naval Military and Expeditionary Force would be made up of an infantry battalion with several sections attached and a naval brigade of 500 men divided into 6 companies. Walker returned to the colours shortly after the call went out for volunteers and signed on once again as John Courtney. He was assigned to No. 3 Company of the Naval Brigade, led by Lieutenant Oscar Gillen. By the 18th of August, the AN&MEF had gathered at Cockatoo Island. The soldiers and sailors boarded the transport ship Berrima and departed the same day, escorted by the bulk of Royal Australian Navy, including His Majesty's Australian ships Australia Encounter, Parramatta, and submarines Alpha Echo 1 and Alpha Echo 2. After a brief stop at Palm Island, a force arrived off Kedaball in the early hours of 11th of September. The initial landing went unopposed, but as the morning went on, German resistance intensified. As casualties mounted, calls for assistance were made. Reinforcements from Berrima began landing at Cabot Hall at around 10 a.m. No. 3 Company of the Naval Brigade landed first. Lieutenant Commander Charles Elwell of the Royal Navy took command of the company and led it along Bitapaka Road towards the fighting, with scouts sent out on both sides of the road. About 40 minutes later, Walker, who was in one of the scouting parties, stepped out of the jungle onto the road and was shot by New Guinean soldiers in the treetops. One round hit him in the chest, another in the base of his skull, killing him instantly, and he became the first Australian serving in an Australian force to be killed during the First World War. Elwell was killed soon after as he led a frontal assault on a nearby German position. Bob Moffat was shot twice in the side and was taken offshore to HMAS Australia, where he died the following morning. Initially laid to rest at Cabot Hall, Walker and Elwell's remains were later reinterred in the Bitapaka War Cemetery at Rabaul. John Walker was 29 years old. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, among almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. A photo of the original graves of both John Walker and Commander Charles Elwell at Cabot Hall is displayed today besides the pool of reflection. This is but one of many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember able seaman John Edward Walker, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They have no grave, but the cruel sea. No flowers lay at their head. A rusting hulk is their tombstone, a fast on the ocean bed. They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen and students, that concludes this evening's last post ceremony. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.